Yeah.
There comes everybody. Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. Lisa Senecal here, and I am so excited to be back with my friend David Pepper. David, welcome.
Thank you.
Happy Thursday.
Good to be back with everybody.
Man, I don't know how it got to be Thursday already this week, but here we are. David is an author, a political activist. He is doing God's work in Ohio and so many other states. He is the author of Perspectives on Substack, and his books, Saving Democracy and Laboratories of Autocracy, absolutely essential reading. If you haven't read them, get your hands on them. Available everywhere, but they're really, really important books, both Saving Democracy, that gives people real tools for things that they can be doing, and also Laboratories of Autocracy. Those are just so active in the U.S. right now, and that's part of what we're going to be talking about this morning, David.
Living out in front of us.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're getting all sorts of real-world constant examples. And we're going to start out this morning talking about Mike Gerrymander Johnson.
Yeah.
Never met a gerrymander he didn't like until Gavin Newsom decided to jump in and play the game that the Republicans have been playing. So can you talk to us about the unbelievably anti-democratic, smooth sailing into office that Mike Johnson has had, courtesy of largely Jerry Newsom?
I mean, it's hard for me to stay too calm when I talk about this because it is so, central and frustrating that, just to put it bluntly, if anyone on here has ever run for school board or city council, I did. I was a council member or county commissioner. You have been through more democracy in your experience than the current Speaker of the House. He is from one of the most gerrymandered states in the country, and that's why he's in power. His first race, primary and general for the state house, they were uncontested. Then he gets himself back in the state house, uncontested. Then he wins 3 gerrymandered district blowouts in a row in Congress. His next race after that, uncontested. And his next race was for Speaker of the House. I mean, he's literally never been in an election. And that sounds shocking, but actually, the more I've thought about it, it's symbolic. He is the perfect representation of today's Republican legislator, especially. They've never been in real elections. They have been rigged the entire time. And so these people only worry about a primary. Often, like Mike Johnson, don't even have a primary. So it's sort of like they're being appointed and reappointed to office completely separate from the voters. That's his career. And so when he starts to lecture anybody about, well, I this and I that, he is in power today. And this is why a lot of these guys just actually aren't very impressive political figures.
Right.
Mike Johnson is not impressive. He's the opposite. It's obvious. One, if he were in a general election in a swing district, he would lose in a blowout. He just isn't good at it. His views are too extreme. But these people have only lived through gerrymandering. And one of the points is that we're now in our second generation in many states like Ohio, because the gerrymandering really got heightened in 2010 and 11. We're now in our second generations. Most states have 8-year term limits of people who've largely been in power, separate from any sense of democracy or accountability to the voters. And Mike Johnson, by being Speaker of the House, is almost the perfect representation of this very flawed form of democracy we're in. And I know we're going to talk about it, and don't even get me started, though, although I will, on what he did in Ohio last year, which shows what a big hypocrite he is, way beyond what I just talked about.
Yeah, we definitely have to get into that because, well, first of all, this guy's third in line for the presidency.
Right.
Which
and never been in an election.
Never been in a serious election. He is unbelievably extreme. And I don't think, because he doesn't get forced ever to answer questions about his Christian nationalist belief system and the degree to which he believes that everyone in this country should be living under Christian nationalist-based
Yeah.
laws is really terrifying. Now, J.D. Vance isn't any better, and he's second in line. But Mike Johnson is a singularly unimpressive human
Definitely.
being if he is asked a question. So we know he loves gerrymandering, and he loves it so much that even when he is supposed to be busy being Speaker of the House, he finds time to go back to his state of Ohio to raise money to make sure that the ballot initiative that's on the Ohio ballot, that is supposed to be an anti-gerrymandering initiative for Ohio to vote on, is reworded to completely confuse voters. And he's there raising money to make sure gerrymandering is there to stay in Ohio. So can you tell us more about this?
So we're going to be the next Texas. This is the bad news. We are the Republicans in Ohio have their eye on 2 and maybe 3 seats to steal through gerrymandering. And the only reason they can do that this year is because a referendum that was very popular for most of last year got reworded on the ballot to make it look like yes meant no and no meant yes. And a campaign was run that Mike Johnson came to Ohio to support that essentially said, vote no to end gerrymandering. That was the yard sign. Vote no to stop gerrymandering. It wasn't trying to win over to their side. It was literally trying to thwart the clear will of Ohio voters to end gerrymandering. And it worked, sadly.
Which is the purpose of gerrymandering to begin with. You don't have to follow the will of the voters.
The polling was so clear that people wanted to end gerrymandering. The only way they knew they could win it, and the Republican chair later admitted, our confusion campaign worked really well. The only way they could win it was simply to get people to vote the wrong way. Mike Johnson came to Ohio to raise money for that absolutely dishonest campaign. And so the reason I got triggered the other day is he started wagging his finger at Gavin Newsom saying, the DCCC is doing this to thwart the will of the voters of California who wanted a redistricting commission to end gerrymandering. This guy came to Ohio to thwart the will of Ohio voters by telling them that they should vote no on a redistricting commission if they wanted to stop gerrymandering from happening. That was less than a year ago. So again, and the only reason they can potentially grab a couple seats here, 2 or 3, is because of that incredibly cynical isn't the right word for it, truly gaslighting, dishonest campaign, which Mike Johnson was eager to be part of. So when I watched him talk about, and all we wanted here was what California has had. But this is the trick, and this is why we have to fight fire with fire. So they want to have redistricting commissions in California, but they stop them with all their might in Ohio. And it's that differential treatment that will allow them to win a House that they otherwise would lose. But that shows you just what kind of duplicitous, sort of double-dealing dishonesty that guys like Johnson are doing. And by the way, I sent this to Gavin Newsom, who's a friend of mine, saying, don't take, and he's not, but don't take any grief from this guy because in Ohio, he did everything in his power to literally warp the will of Ohio voters so that he could gerrymander right now, which is what they're doing.
Yeah, it's so infuriating that, we get frustrated when people aren't informed voters and, tune in too late or just have kind of been checked out and they show up in the voting booth and they don't know what's going on. People in Ohio knew what they wanted. And they wanted to go in and vote to end gerrymandering in that state, which you and I have talked about this a lot of times, David. What gerrymandering has done to the state of Ohio is a tragedy, and it is going to be a very long time digging back out of all the damage that has been done. But to know that the only way that what you are trying to make law is going to pass is to deceive voters. And you're proud of that. You brag about it after you trick the voters into voting for what you wanted. and somehow you believe that you are part of a democratic system
Yeah.
when you're doing that. It's
Yeah.
so disgusting.
And to be clear, Ohioans actually voted to end gerrymandering twice in the last decade by 70-30 and 75-25. The only reason we needed the Redistricting Commission is because unlike all the other states, including California and New York, the politicians broke the Constitution, and that's why the Redistricting Commission was necessary to fire them from the process. So the voting will of the Ohioans isn't just that a poll said it. We know from elections it's been 70 or 75% to end gerrymandering. But yeah, that's and just to be clear, and I said this already once, but probably not slowly enough. It wasn't just that they put up a whole campaign saying vote no on issue 1 to stop gerrymandering. It was that the elections officials that are Republicans, like the Secretary of State, the ballot language itself said voting yes on this issue will undo protections against gerrymandering and will require gerrymandering. So if you didn't know anything else, a voter paying attention who knows they want to end gerrymandering,
Yep.
if I and you had read that ballot language, we would have voted no. It
Yeah.
was that misleading. It was a yes means no campaign and ballot language. And of course, it all happened at the same time, clearly was coordinated. And Mike Johnson was all in on it. And Donald Trump was too by the end. And this is clearly their goal. Stop them from ending gerrymandering in red states so we can rig those states as much as possible to maintain a majority that we think we otherwise would lose, which I think they would lose in 26 if they can
Yeah.
get away with all this.
So Mike Johnson came and raised money in the state of Ohio and I'm sure there was a lot of outside money coming into the state of Ohio to make sure that this did not pass. And then he has the gall to be publicly supporting what the state of Texas is doing, what Greg Abbott's doing down there, and successfully now.
Yeah.
So it's not just that a year ago he was pulling this BS in Ohio.
Right.
We're talking about days in between him supporting Texas gerrymandering and crowing about the evils of gerrymandering when they're talking about this for the state of California, where the Republicans are not going to pick up any votes if this happens. And in the state of California, it's actually going to go to votors first. So it is a more democratic process than what they just did in Texas.
And in Ohio, they didn't go to voters saying, we want to draw different districts. They drew them. They were found to be unconstitutional 7 times, and they still made them the map. So unlike California, they actually just broke the law. And currently in Ohio, the current congressional map is unconstitutional. They're about to make it more unconstitutional. So yes, and then, by the way, in New York, which Republicans like to point to, a court in New York struck down a map as unconstitutional, and the politicians followed the court order. In Ohio, and that's why the map is frankly more balanced than it originally was. In Ohio, they got a court order, they just violated it. So yeah, it really is. People, in some ways, people really still under are under horrified by just how bad what they did in Ohio is. And they are going to, and so not only did he support Texas, I guarantee you, Mike Johnson is looking at maps of Ohio as we speak.
Oh, yeah.
So he says the DCCC is doing this, and it's total projection in California. Right now in Ohio, between the State House and Congress and Johnson, they are going over maps to see how to screw up the Akron district and the Toledo district and maybe the Cincinnati district. That is happening right now. In the next month or two, we're going to all see what it looks like. But they're doing that this second. And again, they only can do it because they thwarted the will of the people last November.
Yeah, and folks, when you get a chance, just pull up what the congressional maps look like right now in the state of Ohio.
Yeah.
It's insane. You don't have to spend a lot of time looking at these maps to realize the districts make no sense.
Yeah.
And they make no sense because of gerrymandering.
Yes.
So,
and one quick close on this, though.
Yeah.
Why can they do all this? Because they control state houses. How can we combat this long term? We got to go make state houses more balanced again. The reason those Texas Republicans and Ohio Republicans, again, their most important gerrymander, as much as we've talked about Congress, is the state house gerrymander.
Mm.
And it's from that unaccountable position that Mike Johnson can say, do this, this, and this. And they all say, absolutely. And there's never any accountability for their state house votes to gerrymander. And until we change our mindset and
Yeah.
say, we're running against these people at the state house level who are the laboratories of autocracy doing this, we won't ever change their bad behavior. So we have to adjust, go one level down. There should be not one uncontested Texas Republican next year and not one uncontested Ohio Republican, because it's the uncontested state house people that by the way, I was in Indiana the other day. They're looking at 2 Indiana seats. I met a woman from rural Indiana running in a tough red district, and she said, our goal is to run in every single district in the state of Indiana. I said, wonderful. That long term, over time, is how we stop this extremism that ends up pulling down not just state level democracy, but national democracy.
And the one important thing to remind people is that this isn't, we're not saying, it's great to have Democratic candidates run unopposed in these state races. It's not. It's not.
Yep.
Everybody should run opposed everywhere. That's how democracy works. Democracy is supposed to be a debate of ideas, and you
Yep.
don't get that if you don't have contested elections. So, if there are additional Democratic leaning districts that end up being created in California, then absolutely make sure that there are Republicans running, because we'd love to have those conversations.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Most folks who are running on the Democratic ticket right now don't have a lot of qualms about having to defend their voting records or defend what it is they say they want to do if they're elected.
Yeah.
Republicans, not so comfortable having to defend
Yeah.
what's going on
Well,
right
think about it. If you're Mike Johnson and you've never, ever had an election, you're scared of an election. You have to start doing things. I love campaigning. It made me sharper. I love talking to people. I learned so much. I'd knock on doors between campaigns because it made me feel so in tune. But if you've never had an election, you don't even know the voter file. You don't even knock on doors. So you're truly having to change your entire approach to life. Oh my gosh, I actually have to run for this. I got to actually go out and worry about what people think. Like, imagine never having done that. I think they are deathly afraid of elections. And that's why a lot of the gerrymandering isn't just, hey, we want to have a slight favor. We want to have a map that slightly favors us. Often the gerrymandering is, we don't want to have any opposition because they are so afraid of that opponent showing everyone what they're doing. And if you had in a 50-50 district, Mike Johnson's positions on getting rid of IVF and all that, if you had a straight up vote on those, even a district that leaned Republican, let's say 55-45, he would struggle to get reelected.
now.
And I think they are really afraid of real elections. And that's what the obsession. I mean, gerrymandering is sort of the core of everything for them. The obsession with no competition shows you just how afraid they are of facing real voters in a real general election against a good candidate.
Well, they show us all the time that they're afraid
Yeah.
to face voters, right? Because there are very
Yeah.
few of them willing to hold any
Well,
town
can't even do a
halls
town
back
hall.
in their
Exactly.
districts. So,
Exactly. In
uh,
their own gerrymandered districts, they won't do it.
yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
it says a lot. So, David, let's look ahead, and everything. We do have to fight fire with fire.
Right.
We know what Gavin Newsom is working to do in California now to try to balance out what's being done in Texas. And then Ohio is going to try to do what it's going to do.
Right.
And there will be more Democratic leaning states that will try to balance that out. So it's going to get worse. And
Yeah.
I think, like campaign finance reform, we agree that this is broken, right? We
Yeah.
don't want the ultimate goal here is not to gerrymander this country into oblivion
Yeah.
and have that be the way that our democracy is not
Yeah.
functioning. But what has to happen to undo where we're headed? I mean,
Yeah.
it can't be that the Democrats just keep saying, well, we know this isn't the way that a democracy should be
Yeah.
run, so we're not going to play this game because
Right.
the country's losing
You lose.
its
You're done. Yeah.
democracy.
We're done.
So
Yeah.
what gets
I
us
think
back out of it?
it's a multi-layer strategy, and I think once you see, as we talked about previously, that what's happening right now is sort of a January 6th style attack on the 2026 election. It's just trying to rig the numbers before rather than after in 5 states at least, just like Donald Trump tried to do it in 2020, 4 or 5 states, flip the electoral college, win. We can't just let that happen. But we also don't want to. We should all be clear. We want a world where nobody gerrymanders and not everybody gerrymanders. Now, if half the world gerrymanders and the other half doesn't, you could lose your democracy. We can't allow that to happen. But that's why I like the Gavin Newsom. It's always been a trigger. I don't want to do it either, but if you do it, we have to. If you're going to grab 5 seats, we have to negate those 5 seats. It is clearly just defense. At the same time, now that we have squawking from California and New York Republicans, the minute this recess ends, and I know they're afraid of Epstein, but it's going to end, Democrats should walk in there with the same, um, Freedom to Vote Act from before that ends gerrymandering and call a vote right away. So we always make clear whether it's how we shape the state level districting we are forced to do to play defense, but the North Star is always we don't want to gerrymander, to a federal bill that says no one should gerrymander, to even a constitutional amendment that says no one should gerrymander. And by the way, I think if you did that right, 65, like in Ohio, 65% of Americans would agree with you. And maybe the awfulness of the short term will make people see this is bad. It's bad for everybody. It's crushing governance. Forget party for a second. Ohio's government is broken because the people are no longer part of it. Ohio's government is corrupt because the special interests can get whatever they want, no matter how unpopular, and the people can't stop it. So it's just corrupt government in the end. And maybe this ugly moment, if we especially if we keep saying the North Star is that nobody gerrymanders, it's bad for everybody. We got to fight fire with fire. But in at the federal level through legislation, I think once again trying to get the Supreme Court to do the right thing, constitutional amendment, never lose that as part of the message. And the last one is gerrymandering in blue states is defense, and offense is what we said earlier. Go run in red states against the people doing the gerrymandering. If you can bring forward an initiative like we did successfully 2 out of 3 times here, if you're a state that can do that, bring it forward. But go on offense in red states, run against the people gerrymandering. Maybe not by talking about gerrymandering, maybe by talking about how Greg Abbott's going to destroy public schools in rural Texas with his privatization scheme or Medicaid cuts. But once you start running in these places harder, I think you start to play offense, because if all we do is gerrymander blue states, we're really not solving the problem.
Right.
We're only playing defense. So I think a combination of those things. And I was actually happy to see Obama say this the other day. He was sort of saying the same thing. He's been dedicated, like Eric Holder, ending gerrymandering. We have to maintain that high principle. But in the short term, if you don't fight fire with fire, we're just going to lose the House forever. And we can't afford that, obviously.
Right. And then legislation will be passed, and it won't be the legislation that we want
Yeah,
to
it'll
see
be just
passed.
it'll be a downward spiral. I mean, this is competitive autocracy in action. I don't think they're going to cancel elections. That's not what competitive autocracy or
Yep.
Orban do. What they do is they have elections, but they do everything they can, get rid of mail ballots, get rid of fair districts whenever they can, to basically guarantee the results in advance. This is competitive autocracy, and then claim legitimacy and a mandate from a false victory. So the hardest fight we have to engage in is to stop them at moments where they're trying to rig the rules. And that's what I think, whether it was the House Democrats. Sorry, hold on a second. Whether it was the House Democrats or whether it's Gavin Newsom or others, they are stepping up at the moment where there is clearly an effort to make us a competitive autocracy in a way that we haven't seen. So we have to fight that, but then get back to the work of lifting democracy everywhere, which is also long-term essential.
Well, this isn't the only way that our democracy is broken.
Right.
So let's, we have a couple of minutes left. Red states are lining up, most red state governors are lining up to send troops at the request, National Guard troops at the request of Donald Trump, to Washington, D.C., where they are absolutely not needed because crime rates have been falling, and um, people in D.C. don't want they don't want DC National Guard. They
Right.
sure as hell don't want the National Guard coming from other cities. And
Yep.
I don't think most Guards people want to be acting in this role. But we have Louisiana, Tennessee, and Mississippi, all of which have higher crime rates, 2, 3, and in Mississippi, 4 times the murder rate of
Yep.
Washington, D.C. None of these states saw fit to use the Guard in their own states to try to bring down crime, but
Right.
they're all sending, happily, troops to DC. And unfortunately, Mike DeWine,
Yep.
the
Hello.
moderate Republican that he pretends to be, is sending troops from Ohio.
Yeah. Let me be clear, and I've written this a number of times. And this has been sort of said over time. It's the moderates that are making Trump that much more dangerous because over time, if Ted Cruz or Tom Cotton say something crazy, we're used to that. That doesn't legitimize Trump with other voters. When moderates say by sending those National Guards, and then they say what Mike DeWine said publicly, it's the right thing to do. That's when Trump wins because the more moderate brand, and Mike DeWine is a conservative on some issues and not on others. But when the more moderate brand, when the more moderate brand says what Trump is doing is okay, they are providing cover with a brand that is more legitimate. And that's why longer term, it's the moderates who always go along. Mike DeWine has admitted the current gerrymander is illegal and he voted for it. He will sign the bill again this time. So what Mike DeWine and other moderates do, and Rob Portman did this a lot, and he's a very graceful person, but when it mattered most on impeachment, other things, they go along. And I
Yep.
believe they do more damage when they go along than the ones you expect to because they paper over the extremism and they legitimize it as less bad than it is. So it wasn't only so Mike DeWine, this is what he does. If you and I met Mike DeWine tomorrow, he'd be as nice as can be. I ran against him. We had some nasty debates, but when he takes that all shucks grandfatherly image and says, well, this is the right thing to do, it is legitimizing the clear, optics of, martial law. Let's be clear.
Right.
When you're sending the military to police cities, that's kind of what martial law is. And to say, well, it's the right thing to do, that's one other of so many examples of 10 years where the moderates are giving legitimacy to extremism. And one of the worst things that happens is once you do it once, you never stop. It's like the law firms caving. Once the moderates the first time say, I'm okay with Trump doing this because of this, they never can ever again say no. And so they do it on gerrymandering. Mike DeWine, he literally said, yeah, this is not a good map. It's unconstitutional, but I'll vote for it. Like it was the same anti-democracy step. And yes, so it's terrible. And I give your Governor Scott credit. Some Republicans are saying no. Good for them. Because contributing to the optics, which Trump wants so badly, of troops in cities, I mean, that's as red a flag as there is for the path towards autocracy. We all know that. It's blatantly obvious. So yeah, it's a real shame. It's more damaging when moderates do it, but sadly, it's exactly what we've seen now for 10 years.
Yeah, and I do want to give credit to our governor Phil Scott. He is a Republican. Our blue state of Vermont has elected him and reelected him. He does not run unopposed. And we don't have a gerrymandered state, which is part of what gives a Republican governor the ability. Now, I'm not saying that's why he's doing this. I genuinely think Phil Scott is a good guy, and I think he tries to do the right things. And we agree on some things and we disagree on some things, but he's an old school Republican in the form of what New England Republicans used to be. But DeWine would have to deal with the voters and with the legislature if he decides to try to buck Trump, and he doesn't want to do that. But he's not running again, right?
No, that's the worst part. Is he's his second term. He's like the North Carolina Senator Tillis. Like he's in the second term. He's not running again for anything. His entire party's rejected him. He didn't want them to endorse, so they've endorsed Ramaswamy. The former Ohio State football coach Tressel is his lieutenant governor, was thinking about running for governor. Mike DeWine pleaded and begged for the party not to endorse Ramaswamy, and they laughed at him. They endorsed, like 95% of them endorsed Ramaswamy. So he's already been rejected by his party over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And so my attitude, you got 2 years left. You can actually be like Scott. You can stand up for what's right, stand up to gerrymandering and say, I'm not going to do this. Stand up to this horrible maneuver in D.C. And clearly what Trump wants is that be a preview for other cities. And I just, for the life of me, I mean, it goes back to the Maya Angelou quote of there's no attribute more important than courage. Without courage, all your other positive attributes don't really matter because they all disappear if you don't have courage. And I think some of the folks we're talking about, that's the essential problem. They are just deathly afraid of that moment where they say, I'm not going to do that. And they know it's wrong. He admitted that gerrymandering was unconstitutional here, and he still couldn't do the backbone. And I do think we're seeing a case study that Maya Angelou quote all over this country, and we've seen it now play out for a decade.
Yep, we have, and Rob Portman falls squarely into that category, that he was not running for anything when he decided to go along with the extremists in the Republican Party, and I will.
And wouldn't he was one of the key votes on impeachment, and he wouldn't do it. And now
I'll
look
be
at.
forever
And by the way,
disgusted.
these are people who, in other ways, you like you said with your governor, like these are people who you would like, and it's this tragedy that in the end, the lack of courage to do the right thing has caused so much damage. And again, I believe when that type of person, if your governor were to have said, "Oh, I think it's fine what he's doing," that's more damaging than Tom Cotton saying it's fine.
Yeah.
And so it's the march of the moderates that are basically legitimizing all of it that I think has done more damage and allowed Trump to take over that party and get more credibility on awful things than he deserves because so many moderates have played and so many longtime people that were seen as better than that have all lined up and gone for it. And I think they have done more damage in the end than actually the ones who are more right wing to begin with.
Yeah, I agree, because people have more of a relationship with their local and state representatives, and so when they endorse something as being okay, because they feel like, I've been voting for this person, and I think they're a good person, and they want to do the right thing, and they try to do the right thing. So if they say this is okay, then it must be okay. Versus Ted Cruz, where you just assume anything that the guy says is wrong, and there's some ulterior motive because he's a dirtbag. But
and you know who knows this? Donald Trump.
Yeah.
When Rob Portman was the world's expert on Ukraine.
Yeah.
Okay. He sincerely was helping Ukraine.
Yep.
But within a few months of the phone call getting so controversial, he made a statement about how it was okay that Trump shook down Zelensky. It was a terrible moment. And he said it's because Europe wasn't doing their fair share. And within a day, I think this was all orchestrated with the White House, but a day later, Trump in the White House said, even Rob Portman said what I said was okay. He knows that the legitimacy of some of these sort of elder statesmen lend him huge credibility when he's done something wrong. So he could do the same thing with Mike. Even Mike DeWine said it's okay to send troops here. So he literally knows the effect we're talking about. And he even said, even Rob Portman has said this. That shows you that he knows full well that them going along really empowers him and really protects him from what should be a much more clear criticism of, oh, this is absolutely extremist nonsense, or that phone call and shaking down Zelensky was completely corrupt. But once the others who know better say it's okay, then he gets to sort of use that for his own benefit. Yeah.
So we'll leave you today, everybody, with, and thank you so much, everyone, for being here. This is why we go out and we put pressure on our local and state representatives all the time. It's why if somebody is willing to put their name forward to run in an uncontested race, be that person or support that person. If you have a Republican rep at any level who is not willing to have conversations with their constituents, they're not holding town halls when they're back in districts, then hold a town hall anyway. Hold a town hall with them in absentia and still have that conversation about what they are doing that is so anti-democratic and is hurting on issues from the most basic local and state issues all the way up to these national issues that get so much more attention. So there are things we can be doing every day, calling, emailing, writing letters, making sure that your elected officials know that you're not going to be silent and you're not going to make it easy for them.
Yeah.
So
The best event I
keep it
had one of
louder.
the best 3 or 4 events I've been to this year was the empty chair town hall meeting we did
That was
just north of
brilliant.
here. We had 800 people. We walked through his entire record. We took questions. It was amazing. It was a blast, and it led to a whole lot of organizing afterwards. So, yeah, have the town hall anyway. I couldn't agree more. It was a great event.
Well, thank you, David. As always, thank you, everybody, for being here. We appreciate you so much. Subscribe to David's Perspectives Substack. It really is essential reading, and it's empowering. So many important folks that you're talking to, David, and real world work that we can all be doing every day to make sure that we are strengthening our democracy and ensuring that we still get to live in one. So we'll see you again
Thanks,
next week,
everybody.
David.
Good
Thanks
to see
all.
you. Take care, folks.
Bye-bye.